We hope you will choose a bushy evergreen native species when you replace the pear trees. This will maximize future flexibility. These screening plants are shown with the letters A in the layout. This open green space is on the south side of Fidelity, east of the Davy Graveyard. Here's a list of some features that we think would be nice in this space. I'm going to go through each one of these now. Picnic tables. So the B's on the layout show picnic tables. This is a fairly standard feature that you'll find in a park, offering visitors a place to rest and to enjoy the company of fellow humans. The next item, that's my personal favorite, is the community garden. Just for some background, I worked with the city of Myrtle Beach prior to moving here and with Keep America Beautiful to create a community garden in Myrtle Beach proper. People lined up to build community in a place that's overrun with tourists, and it worked, and it's thriving to this day. The next item on the list is a jogging trail. This is represented or illustrated with the letter D on the illustration here. It's a great idea. We all know that there's a direct correlation between wealth and health. In fact, with over 2.5 acres of woods surrounding this meadow, I think that jogging path distance could be doubled. The next item is a paved path for wheelchairs. This is illustrated with the letter E. It goes sort of through the middle of the meadow. The next item would be benches. This is represented with the letter F underneath the existing trees that you see there next to Fidelity Street. We think a dog run would be a fantastic amenity to have here, represented with the letter G. I, for one, would use this amenity daily, and I'm sure will the countless dog parents that I encounter on the sidewalk every day. We also think that a playground would be a fantastic amenity to have. With all the kids I see running around White Oak and Fidelity Court, this feature will get used. And let me tell you, parents will rejoice for not needing to get in their cars to drive to one of the other parks north of Main Street for their children to go to a playground. Just a note that we located the dog park and the playground in sort of the far left corner, which is the furthest part away from, or the furthest location away from the cemetery. It's sort of protected by a rise that runs through the driveway.
So if you'll start to wrap up, please.
Sir. Another item, letter G or J, would represent a yoga platform that could also be used for ceremonies or astronomy. And the last item would be the open field represented by letter K. To wrap up my presentation, I'll just say that a park in this part of town would be an investment in the health of lower income populations for generations to come. In addition, leaving this tract of land as open green space would support the town of Carrboro continuing to ensure that all people have equitable access to parks and open space. Thank you.
Thank you, Coy. All right, next on the list on this topic is Dr. Rodney Coleman. Pastor Coleman, welcome.
To our council members, my purpose or aim is to not delegitimize one's opinion of needing a park, but to give voice to the need for families to be accommodated during the darkest hours of their lives. Death is inevitable, and it is understood to be a part of life. And even though it is common, it is still very disheartening. It's heart-wrenching. Historically, slaves during the Middle Passage were not even respected enough to be provided with proper burial. If they expired prior to reaching the land, they were often dumped overboard. In the African American culture, community, proper burial is revered as sacred. It is something that we don't take lightly. Just as community for the living is important, it is also important
Yes.
We all set? Okay. Welcome everyone to the May 16th meeting of Carrboro Town Council. It's great to see you all. Mayor Damon Siles is away this evening, and so I have the honor of sitting in as your mayor pro tem. So it's a pleasure to be with you all. So as is our normal custom, we'll begin the meeting with a centering moment from our poet laureate, Liza Wolfe Francis. Thank you. Come join us.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you. It's a full house in here. So I brought a poem tonight by one of my favorite poets named Ross Gay, and it's called Throwing Children. It is really something when a kid who has a hard time becomes a kid who's having a good time, in no small part thanks to you throwing that kid in the air again and again on a mile-long walk home from the Indian joint as her mom looks sideways at you like, you don't need to keep doing this because you're pouring with sweat and breathing a little bit. Now you're getting a good workout. But because the kid laughs like a horse up there, laughs like a kangaroo beating her wings against the light, because she laughs like a happy little kid, and when coming down and grabbing your forearm to brace herself for the time when you will drop her, which you don't, and slides her hands into yours as she says for the 40th time, the 50th time, inexhaustible, her delight again, 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 and again, and you say, give me till the redbud tree, or give me till the persimmon tree, because she knows the trees, and so quiet you almost can't hear her through her giggles. She says, okay, till the next tree when she explodes, howling, yanking your arm from the socket again, again, all the wolves and mourning doves flying from her tiny throat, and you throw her so high she lives up there in the tree for a minute. She notices the ants organizing on the bark and a bumblebee carousing the little unripe persimmon in its beret. She laughs and laughs as she hovers up there like a bumblebee, like a hummingbird up there giggling in the light, like a giddy little girl up there the world knows how to love. Thank you. That's Ross Gay.
Thank you, Liza. Next, we have a whole slew of resolutions and proclamations. And council members, I'm going to begin with one that's actually not on your agenda, but I wanted to share it because Mayor Siles has issued a proclamation for Period Poverty Awareness Week, May 22nd through May 28th. Nobody from the Diaper Bank in North Carolina was able to join us this evening, I don't believe. So we're not going to read the resolution. But I did want to just mention one sentence from the resolution that really stood out to me, and it's a number. 1 in 5 people who have a period miss work or school due to lack of period supplies. And this is also going to be many of the same people who are missing opportunities to go to our public library because of lack of the menstrual products. I read just a few weeks ago that Chapel Hill Public Library became the first library system in the Triangle to now have coin-free dispensers for menstrual products in all 5 of their bathrooms. And it will really help the library to become a more welcoming place, more accessible for every day of the month. And so, council members, I just wanted to note that because as next year, the 203 project opens and the Orange County Southern Branch Library is there, I hope it's something that will be considered for our public library too, following that leadership from our friends in Chapel Hill. Next up is a resolution supporting the right of all North Carolinians to safe and comprehensive reproductive health care. This resolution, I believe everybody did get an email from Mayor Siles, and I also think you have a hard copy with you. This is a joint resolution issued for issuing by the county as well as the towns of Chapel Hill and Hillsborough. in opposition to Senate Bill 20, which would ban abortions after the 12-week mark of a pregnancy, and it includes some other restrictions as well. So Mayor Siles has taken this joint resolution and tailored it specifically for Carrboro. I wanted to first mention to you that the resolution does not include anything about what we will be doing with this. Will we be, assuming we approve it, will we be issuing it to our congressional delegation, to both the entire, both chambers in the General Assembly? It sounds like Eleazar, the Senate just recently voted just a few minutes ago to override Governor Cooper's veto. So we're waiting on the House vote, but the question is thoughts on, do we try to approve this and then issue it with the help of Wesley? We could actually get this out this evening. So thoughts, please. Yes, Eleazar.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Pro Tem. I will say, as you mentioned, the Senate did vote to override the governor's veto earlier. As mentioned minutes ago, the House is supposed to be convening within the hour to do the same. So with that, I would move an amendment to the resolution to add a therefore clause that would direct the town clerk to email this resolution to the leadership of the House immediately upon passage or adoption.
And Wesley, does that sound like that would be something that would be doable in terms of our trying to still have the resolution be relevant? Great.
During the meeting.
Great. Other comments?
Motion, right?
We will.
Motion that I don't need to revise.
Oh, perfect. Yes, then
That way you have to kind of mess with language.
perfect. So then I would move then that if this resolution is adopted tonight, that we would instruct the clerk to email it to leadership immediately after that vote. And I would ask for a second.
But I'd also ask that we send copies to our partners.
Correct. Yes. So then I would amend my motion to not only include that email to leadership in the House, but also include our partners in other municipalities in Orange County.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve the resolution with these changes suggested by Eleazar?
Yep. I think we still need to vote on mine.
Is there a motion to approve Eleazar's proposal on sharing our approved resolution?
I seconded it.
And you seconded. Oh, is all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Unanimously approved. Thank you. And Eleazar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would move to approve this resolution.
Second.
Motion to approve by Eleazar, seconded by Barbara. All those in favor of approving the resolution, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Unanimously approved. So thank you for dealing with that. Short notice, Wesley.
As soon as public comment's over, I'll get that going.
That will be great. Thanks. Okay. Next up, we have proclamation for Police Week. And do we have, well, Chief ATEC, come on up. My reading glasses. And Police Week. And there we go. Great. Okay, can you hear me all right? Before I begin reading a resolution, I just had to share a couple of more personal comments. Our Chief ATEC, you and your officers put on your badge each and every day. putting your own safety at risk in order to protect the safety of all of our community. And I really feel like it's kind of the ultimate form of public service, and it's the ultimate sacrifice for all of us. And I know that policing is one of those professions, you get lots of criticisms and you don't always get the positive feedback to go along with it, but I do appreciate you, I appreciate your officers, and it really is an honor for me this evening to get to read this proclamation in honor of Police Week. So here we go. Whereas in 1961, a joint resolution of Congress authorized the President to proclaim May 15th of each year to be Peace Officers Memorial Day, which honors law enforcement officers who have been killed or disabled in the line of duty, and to proclaim the week of each year during which that date occurs as Police Week. And whereas employees in the Carrboro Police Department provide a vital public service by acting as first responders in emergency and crisis situations, by investigating and solving crimes, by offering a variety of community services to individuals, local businesses, and community organizations and agencies, and by participating in ongoing training to stay up to date on current policing techniques, to achieve the department's bias-free policing goals, and to provide community services in a fair and professional manner. Whereas in calendar year 2022, the police department handled more than 17,000 calls for service and hosted more than 50 community events, including neighborhood meetings, job fairs, and the department's prescription drug drop-off events. And whereas in 2022, the police department recorded 9 uses of naloxone to reverse opioid overdoses, and in 2015 was the first law enforcement agency in North Carolina to use this life-saving tool. And whereas employees in the police department attended nearly 14 hours of training, 2 officers completed crisis intervention training, 2 officers retired and 6 new officers were hired, and 2 K-9s retired and 2 new K-9s were trained. And whereas Sergeant Charles Brent Hobby was named Carrboro's 2022 Police Officer of the Year and was honored on Community Hero Night with Carolina Athletics at the Dean Smith Center in Chapel Hill during the halftime of a Tar Heel men's basketball game. And whereas in the town's most recent biennial community survey, the police department was among the major categories of town services that had the highest levels of satisfaction. Now, therefore, I, Damon Siles, Mayor of Town of Carrboro, North Carolina, do hereby proclaim the week of May 14th through May 20th, 2023, to be Police Week in Carrboro. I encourage residents to share their gratitude with the officers and other professionals in the police department for promoting the safety of Carrboro's residents and visitors, and to understand the duties and responsibilities of these essential employees and the risks they often face to help make Carrboro a safe and welcoming place to live. This, the 12th day of May, 2023. So, that's a lot. Thank you so much for your service as well as the service of your officers. Deeply appreciate it. Would you like to say a few words? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Good evening. One, I want to say thank you. Thank you. It's been 2022 has been a challenging year for the police department. 2023 is trying to one-up it, so we're trying to beat it back. But I appreciate the council's support. I appreciate Mr. White's support, HR's support, and the community's support. So it is a difficult job. A lot of what we do, some people don't know about, and that's one of the challenges. But if you want to call me, if you want to talk about something, I'm here. If you have a concern, give me a call. And I'm grateful for this community for the opportunity to serve. So thank you.
Hey, Chief ATAC, we're grateful for your leadership. Next up is a resolution proclaiming May 21st through 27th as Public Works Week. And do we have someone here to accept that? Director Snipes, welcome. Nice to see you both. Welcome. Before I begin, I just wanted to mention that when I think of our Public Works Department, really the first thing that comes to my mind is their responsiveness, and I'm sure many of you feel the same way. There's been times when community members have reached out because there's been a fallen tree, there has been a fallen stop sign, there has been the need to prep the streets, get ready for an ice storm. There's been the problem when the roundabout first went in and some of the cars were driving down the Francis Shetley Bikeway by accident. But our Public Works Department is always there, very responsive. We're really lucky to have the two of you and the rest of your department. So here we go with the proclamation. This one is just a little shorter. Public Works Week. Whereas this year marks the 63rd annual observance of National Public Works Week, and the theme of this year's observance is Connecting the World Through Public Works, highlighting how public works connects us all through infrastructure and services. And whereas Carrboro Public Works makes important contributions to the community's well-being by providing reliable solid waste collection, loose leaf collection, street, greenway, and right-of-way maintenance, snow removal, stormwater facility maintenance, mowing and landscaping of town properties and rights-of-way, tree trimming and removal, ball field preparation and maintenance, facility maintenance, vehicle and equipment maintenance, cemetery maintenance and burials, and more. And whereas the accomplishments of Carrboro Public Works Department in the past year include, among many others, awarding a construction contract and breaking ground on the 203 project, completing a town-wide speed table improvement project, completing sidewalk and curb ramp improvements in compliance with the American with Disabilities Act, installing bike boxes on West Main Street, replacing 54 trees at Martin Luther King Jr. Park, facilitating the town's recertification as a Tree City USA for its 37th year, completing bus shelter improvements, adding 2 hybrid electric vehicles to the Public Works fleet, along with 2 electric mowers, 1 utility vehicle, and 3 weed eaters and backpack blowers. And finally, continuing the leaf compost program on the town's property on Old NC 86 in accordance with requirements of the NC Department of Environmental Quality. Whereas in the most recent biennial community survey, Carrboro Public Works earned residents' highest rates of satisfaction, with 91% of residents indicated they were satisfied or very satisfied with your department's services. Now, therefore, I, Damon Siles, Mayor of the town of Carrboro, North Carolina, do hereby proclaim the week of May 21 through May 27, 2023, to be Public Works Week in Carrboro. I encourage all residents to thank and celebrate the town's public works employees and to recognize the importance of public works professionals and public works programs for protecting our health, safety, and quality of life and making Carrboro a great place to live. This, the 16th day of May, 2023. So thank you, Director Snipes. Thank you, Kristen. It's an honor. And appreciate all your good work and everyone in your department as well.
Thank you.
Thanks again. Would you like to say a few words? Or?
Yeah. So yes, as being the interim public works director for the town of Carrboro, I just want to thank the board here and the manager here for their support for our team. This is a true team effort here. We take pride in customer service, and if you have any complaints or any items that you see, please try to visit our website and let us know. A lot of the residents and our town employees are our eyes and ears in the field, so please let us know, and we will have our supervisors, have our staff try to perform anything that's needed there. Thank you.
Okay, well, that was fun. Next, we're going to turn things over to our town clerk for announcements of upcoming meetings.
All right. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, Council. Got a few meeting updates here. First up, we have the Stormwater Advisory Commission meeting on May 17th at 6:30 p.m., and that is virtual. Also on May 17th, we have the Affordable Housing Advisory Commission meeting. That's at 7 p.m., and that'll be held at 108 Bim Street. Next, on May 18th, we have a Transportation Advisory Board and Safe Routes to Schools Committee meeting. That will be virtual, and that will actually begin at 5 p.m. So note the different start time on that at 5 p.m. Also on May 18th, we have a Climate Action Team meeting at 7 p.m., and that will be virtual. May 18th, we have a Planning Board meeting at 7:30 p.m. here in the Council's boardroom. And then next week, May 22nd, we have a Community Safety Task Force meeting at 7 p.m., and that will be held virtually. Then next Tuesday, May 23rd, our next Town Council meeting at 7 o'clock here in the boardroom. I also did want to note, this is for the Council, based on your replies to me about a upcoming work session. Looked like the consensus was Thursday, June 15th at 7 p.m. for a work session for the cemetery. So I'll make that note. Just wanted to announce it in a public meeting, let everyone know.
Right.
All right. That's all I
Okay,
have.
good. Thank you, Wesley. Council members, any additional meetings? Randy?
No, I just want to make an acknowledgement, so I'll wait until other meetings are shared.
Any other meetings? Okay, Randy, all yours.
All right. Well, I want to acknowledge Rexon Park and their work with Grow to Life yesterday for the field day at Winmore. It was tremendous. It was really unbelievable, all the children that came out and the great fun they had having a field day. I also want to take a moment to thank the fire folk. I want to acknowledge interim Fire Chief Will Potter and Bryce Youngboth and Dylan Lowe. I had a bicycle dust up last week, and I walked myself into the fire station because I want to be sure I wasn't concussed, and they were great. And I just was so appreciative of their attention and care. And I also want to acknowledge this. This is why I'm here tonight, because it's damaged on the inside, but this didn't get any damage. So wear the helmets, they work.
Great. Well, thank you for that, Randy. It's a great reminder of the importance of that helmet, wearing helmets. And I'm glad you're not in concussion protocol this evening. I wanted to just add a couple of things onto Randy's list. Randy mentioned the event at Winmore, and the same group that hosted that event is hosting another event. The Landings Tenant Association will be hosting an event on tenant rights and fair housing. It'll be a community gathering, and the presenter will be Hope Williams, who is with the Legal Aid of North Carolina. So it's a great opportunity to get all kinds of information around tenant rights, as well as some of the services that are provided by Legal Aid. And this event will be Thursday, May 18th from 6 to 7:30 right here at Carrboro Town Hall. And finally, while we're giving appreciation, I just wanted to give an appreciation to staff for the advisory board appreciation dinner on Thursday, I believe, of last week. Opportunity for us to give thanks to everybody who sits on the advisory boards, meets month after month, sometimes sometimes they meet twice in a month, but really devote a lot of their time and energies to help inform council and help give us the pulse of the community. So we appreciate you very much, appreciate staff's hard work in putting together the appreciation dinner. Okay, anything else? All good? Next up will be public comment. And what we do with public comment is we're gonna start off with folks who signed up to share some comments on items that do not appear on the agenda. And actually, that's going to be everyone except one person. Betty Curry, we're going to be coming to you just a little later in the agenda. But for right now, we'll start with everybody else who has signed up for topics not on the agenda. I'm going to read the names in the same order that they appear in my sign-up sheet. And if you could all do me a huge favor, which is that we provide 3 minutes, a soft 3 minutes of comments. And so you're going to hear, if you go over that 3 minutes, you'll hear a timer go off. And we encourage you to be as respectful of that as possible because we do have quite a few speakers this evening. Okay. So we're going to begin. I know some of you will need a little bit of help from Wesley in terms of the slides, and he is here to help in any way he can. We're going to begin with Meg Morgan. Yeah.
Just first, I just want to say a big thank you to our Carrboro PD and Public Works. We really appreciate you guys. The last time I spoke, I shared a piece of my personal story to explain why Fidelity Meadow is so important to me. In just the past 2 weeks, I've spoken to several people in our neighborhood who have similar stories. Anecdotally, the majority come from people who are lower income, work in the service sector, are single parents, minorities, elderly, disabled, neurodivergent, or a combination of the above. Of those who've already spoken in front of town council, Quay is a single parent. Steve, who doesn't own a car, worked behind the meat and seafood counter at Harris Teeter for nearly a decade until he finally had to retire early from disabling pain in his rotator cuffs. Jamarius and Precious moved here from Durham to make a better, quieter life for themselves and their daughter, Sinai. Jay's mom, who lives with them, is disabled from back surgery complications. They also don't own a car. Bob is neurodivergent. We are lower income, with 3 kids, 2 of whom are neurodivergent. Many of the other people I spoke to who are in favor of preserving Fidelity Meadow as a park and against any kind of cemetery expansion also fall into these categories. But that was just my experience, and here are the facts. According to the 2020 census, this isn't just anecdotal. Fidelity Meadow is in the middle of and surrounded by the highest concentration of lower income, minorities, elderly, and disabled residents in Carrboro. For these residents, being able to walk to a park isn't just convenient, it's essential. Tab over. Oh, there we go, cool. The same residents have already made their voices heard in the recently adopted Carrboro Comprehensive Plan. They specifically said they wanted to preserve all remaining green spaces and be within a 10-minute walkshed of a park. Our neighborhood is outside of that walkshed, and we currently have approximately 200 signatures of residents supporting all of Fidelity Meadow becoming a Carrboro park. The vast majority of people who visit Westwood Cemetery drive there. So if the town decides to stay in the municipal cemetery business past Zone 3 filling up, finding land a few minutes outside of town wouldn't make a difference to those who are driving, but it would to those in this neighborhood who would lose the green space walkability. The town just put out a Green Neighborhood Grants program. The plan's stated goal is to raise the community's awareness and involvement in climate action and the enhancement of ecosystem resilience. It also specifies that it seeks to benefit low-income households and residents of color by bringing neighbors together to pursue projects which will reduce greenhouse gas emissions and create natural areas that are more resilient to the impacts of climate change, ultimately benefiting the entire community. That's incredible. But how are neighborhoods like ours supposed to participate when we live in condos and apartments without yards or green spaces? Fidelity Meadow is the ideal location for something like this, which is one of many reasons this land should be preserved for those who need it, not just for this year or this decade, but for future generations to come. Thank you for your time and for the little extra time.
I'll just remind everyone, I really appreciate you being here this evening. And as community members share public comments, we ask that you refrain from clapping. This is just an opportunity to be listening. Thanks very much. Duncan Morgan, come on down. Hey.
I'm going to be reading a few emails from some folks that wanted to be here tonight but couldn't be, but wanted their voices to be heard. So. Hi, Town of Carrboro. We are homeowners at 400 Davie Road, and our kitchen window looks out on Westwood Cemetery. We heard the town is in need of more burial space, and up for consideration is expanding Westwood into the meadow beyond it. We just want to be a voice coming from the neighborhood, urging you not to do this. We know other residents feel the same way, and we're hoping collectively, if we all reach out to the town, we can prevent this from happening and turn the meadow into a green space. We really love our neighborhood. It's diverse, with people representing all ages, financial situations, cultures, and ethnicities. There are so many ways to observe nature, with lots of great trees, birds, and animal sightings, not to mention all the different ways for people to take walks with their families and pets. It would be entirely suitable to turn the meadow into a green space with additional walking paths and some more room to enjoy nature. I also think it could be a chance to create more definitive, privacy-enhancing borders for the existing graveyard so as to keep the two spaces separate. We do not support expanding the cemetery into the meadow. We support devoting the area entirely to being a green space and do not support the option of making it a mixed-use space for a park and a cemetery. Apartment residents matter too. We should have parks and green spaces just like every other part of town. Thanks for hearing us out and letting us add our voices to the many others that are speaking out. Melissa Blaustein and Robert Scruggs, 13-year homeowners, taxpayers, voters, and local service workers. Dear Carrboro Town Council, I write to you in support of the vision for a future community park at the Fidelity Street green space. The many residents within walking distance of this space would benefit from the preservation of this green space, as would residents a bit farther away. An inclusive planning process for this space will lead to amenities that incorporate a variety of needs. Our town is growing rapidly and needs to continue planning for future growth and density, including needs for recreational spaces, community gathering spaces, and the ecosystem services of green spaces. Sincerely, Erica Wood, Carrboro voter. Dear Carrboro Town Council, I support the vision for a future community park at the Fidelity Street green space, rather than a graveyard expansion at the site. Many of us within walking distance of this space need and deserve the park. It would also draw neighbors who live nearby to visit and enjoy, just as they do MLK Park, Anderson Park, and Wilson Park. I think we should prioritize the living and young, especially with this park. Sincerely, Raul Lopez, Carrboro resident. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Duncan. Okay, my next name, I apologize in advance if I totally botch the pronunciation. Josiane? I'm not even going to try the last name. I'm going to stop while I'm ahead. Thanks for being here.
Perfect. Awesome. Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Josiane Lafreniere, and I just wanted to speak a little bit about Fidelity Park. A lot of the comments that previous speakers have made include benefits such as equitable access to green space for low-income and multifamily developments, as well as preventing further heat pollution, kind of focusing on that green energy and promoting sustainable land and development. One thing that I really wanted to highlight was this idea of creating community. I just moved to Carrboro in January, and that's something that as I've met folks, they've really enjoyed talking about this community vibe and community aspect, creating really close connections with those that live around them and in neighboring streets and areas and kind of down the road and things like that. Adding this green space right in the middle of Carrboro, walking distance to everything, right and down. We're walking distance to Weaver Street. We're walking distance to different medical offices, to the library. We're right near an already established gathering place, right here in literally the middle of town. Our folks are able to gather for things such as this past weekend, the craft bazaar, the farmers market. There's, of course, different things going on during the week. I know there's a dance class that meets out in the gazebo. So why not really focus on building that community even more by adding additional green space just down the road? A lot of you have probably seen our Make Park signs scattered throughout the way, kind of calling attention to this issue. And it's something that a lot of people have been able to take to heart. As one of our previous speakers mentioned, we have over 200 signatures on a petition to create this space into a green space, create it into a park. So just a couple of comments from that petition. One person said, "I find it irresponsible to deny future generations the right to make use of this land, and I find that expanding the cemetery goes against Carrboro's core tenet of sustainable development." Another person said, "I think there should be more conversation, public awareness, and community input about this space before the cemetery expansion goes forward and cannot be undone. Creating this community is something that a lot of our residents are really passionate about. It's something that, especially as a newcomer to the area, is something that's kind of true to what makes Carrboro Carrboro. So why not focus that energy on creating a green space?" Thank you.
Thank you, Josiane, and welcome to Carrboro. Sarah Smith. Welcome.
All right. Hello, everybody. Just pull up my notes. All right, so my name is Sarah Smith. So my husband and I are local business owners. We own a restaurant on the Chapel Hill Carrboro line on Franklin Street. And we own a restaurant. And so, you know, as most people know, restaurant work is incredibly stressful and really long hours that we spend on our feet. And it's really hot. And, you know, we work tons of hours, and you know, personally, when I get home, I don't know. I like to use the green space a lot of the time to de-stress. I use it to exercise, commune with nature, meditation, teaching my children about nature. I have 2 young boys that go to Carrboro Elementary, and we go over there with our dog. You know, sometimes we do rock hunting on the big dirt mounds that are over there and bring them back to our little front area. And we've made a little border. You know, we check out the wildlife. There's a lot of deer there sometimes, and we really enjoy the space over there. And also, as a person in long-term recovery, I don't have the luxury of having a glass of wine or a beer after a long day at work. And I feel it's essential to have a space like this within walking distance. As you know, my husband and I share a car. He has it at night. You know, we work opposite shifts. I work in the morning and he goes in with the car at night. And, you know, for other service workers as well, you know, having that space, it's a different option besides substance use after work, which is well known as a major problem in our industry, you know, and I think it should be known to, you know, the city of Carrboro, you know, y'all should be promoting healthy alternatives, you know, lifestyles, especially in a low-income area where there is a lot of service workers that live there, you know, just to provide an alternative for people to get out of your house, go for a walk, you know, just have something else for them to do besides sit in their house. I don't know. It's a great place for me to go. Personally, I have It's been a destination for me. Exercising, I've lost 140 pounds in the last 2 years, which I'm really proud of. And this spot has been crucial to the mental health of myself and, you know, just navigating opening a business and all that entails. And my two neurodivergent boys. And I just want to keep this space for the living and for everybody and for generations to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for sharing those comments. Dr. Carolyn Daniels, welcome. I think you're going to need help with Wesley on that slide there. Yes.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. I just want to speak, and I'm going to try to stay within my 3 minutes, from a personal perspective about Westwood Cemetery. I am a native of Chapel Hill. I grew up here, went to high school here. I did spend a lot of my adult years away because of my husband's military career. But we retired and we returned here in 2012 to Lake Hogan Farm subdivision to rejoin our families and our community. In our end-of-life planning, we had to make a decision of where we wanted to be laid to rest. My husband liked Salisbury Military Cemetery. If you've been there, you know it's beautiful and well kept. But he left the decision up to me to decide where we would be put to rest. And I decided I wanted to be laid in the community that I grew up in the community that I love. And so Westwood Cemetery was selected. My mother died and was buried in 2011 at Chapel Hill Cemetery, which is closed now. And each year our family visits our mother's grave twice a year. We change the flowers, which is a job because the styrofoam cone is not, it does not fit in my mother's cup, so it's a lot of work getting that done. But we spend time there fellowshipping, we pray, we have moments of silence, and talk to our mother, bringing her up to date about family matters. This is a quiet, sacred place where we go to honor and to remember our mother. And I want my family and the community to be able to do the same thing at Westwood Cemetery. Last year, my husband and I purchased a plot at Westwood Cemetery, along with some other family members at that time, and others made plans to purchase in the future. And we had our cemetery monument placed at Westwood Cemetery. There were rumors at a time when we purchased about the expansion of the cemetery, but I had no idea that this would become a serious conversation and a controversial issue. I have difficulty processing the idea that groups would want to block the expansion of this cemetery for a convenience park. But looking at our history of how the disenfranchised and people of color have been treated and disproportionately treated and impacted in our country, I understand why to some extent. I love the outdoors and I love parks, but this is not the location for a park. The integrity and sanctity of the entire land site, which is not large, this land site is not a large one, should be preserved for current and future generations to come. A peaceful, quiet, sacred, final resting place for the people, Westwood Cemetery, not a convenient park, and that is what I would call it, a convenience park. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing those comments, Dr. Daniels. Lori Clark. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, council members. My name is Lori Clark, and I'm always proud to say that my family has been in Orange County for 8 generations. Here in Chapel Hill, Strayhorn proud for 7. I would like to start out by acknowledging the land that we are on and celebrate our indigenous brothers and sisters of Orange County, Occaneechi, Haw, and the Eno First Nations. Thank you for the opportunity for me to talk about preserving the expansion of Westwood Cemetery. There are 11 parks in Carrboro. There are three that are less than a mile from the Westwood Cemetery that would allow people to walk. And there are 2 that are just over a mile. So there are more than ample spaces for people to enjoy, have recreational facilities without impacting the Westwood Cemetery. As I mentioned before, in 1984, my first family member was laid to rest there, and my mother, who is still living, thank God, has a plot and will be laid to rest there as well. When we laid our relatives to rest there, it was a place where they could rest in peace. And when I visit my relatives and we have the opportunity to walk there, it's not that far away, thank God. But like Dr. Daniel said, we visit on Mother's Day, we visit on holidays, so that we have that time that is reverent and sacred that we can spend with them. But it's also a place of solitude and peace. And so I would like for the extension and the cemetery to remain that. Cemeteries are sacred spaces and should remain so. And so I ask that you allow our dear departed family and friends to continue to rest in peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori, for sharing those comments. As Lori walks back, I just wanted to thank all of you who have spoken so far for being so good about staying within our 3-minute time limit. It's very appreciated. And so, Tyria, you're up. There was no connection.
We live in Hillmire, and we would love to.
Is it loud enough?
We live in Hillmire, and we would love to see a park. We live in Hillmire, and we would love to see a park. We live in Hillmire, and we would love to see a park.
I'm sorry, our Make Carrboro Parks Groups petition asks that you save all 5.5 open acres on Fidelity for a big park like the ones that lie on the north side of town, or I'm sorry, north of Main Street.
What is tokenism in participation? Tokenism is participation, quote unquote, for show, where young people have little or no influence. Even among well-intended agencies, tokenism is common when engaging underrepresented groups, including youth. I didn't know much about what was going on with the Westwood Cemetery, if I'm honest, but what I do know is that probably none of you know this young lady's name on the screen. I know her, she's one of my kids. She was told that her picture would be used and this voice would be used for Facebook. And unless the town is working for Facebook, I'm not really sure this is Facebook. Does anyone know her name Do you know the family members that you have? Do you know that if she needs a park, she needs a car, she needs affordable housing, she needs support? Just very, very curious about the time and the energy that people have for a park. I said to one of my friends, I wish I was a park. Or maybe even a dog, because the energy that people have for animals, for parks, it just moves me that Black people can't get the same kind of energy. I'm moved by that. I'm baffled by that. I wish I was a park. And then I think about Black people going in parks. You know where Black people have died? In parks. You know where Black people have been assaulted? In parks. You know where Black people have been told they don't belong? In parks. Good God Almighty, can I just die in peace when it's my time to go? And then I realized that the Black people, specifically who are coming up here, you know, I have been put in my place by this town. My restaurant closed, and I had a Black friend who was assaulted, and I've been put in my place. I was once the token Negro. I felt good about it too. I said, I ain't like y'all. They like me over here.
Soteria.
Until I needed to call the police. Oh, I got to talk to y'all?
That would be most
Oh, okay,
most
I'm sorry.
appreciated. Thank
Well, it's
you.
not just y'all. It's just a community thing, right? It ain't just nobody. It's for everybody. I'm a speaker, so I want to get everybody engaged, you know? But this is something interesting that if you go to the cemetery, I realize that speaking a regular English don't work. So this is what it says here. Masses, no person may engage in recreational activities in any cemetery. For the purpose of this subsection, recreational activities shall include but not limit to the throwing of balls or frisbees, playing games or engaging in sports activities, running or jogging, picnicking, walking of dogs, cats, or other animals, allowing dogs, cats, or other animals to run at large, and to other similar activities inconsistent with the use of a cemetery as a cemetery. Massa, that's what the rules say. And then as a Black woman, I remember the rules were never meant for me anyway.
Thank you, Soteria. Next speaker for 3 minutes of public comments is Bob Proctor.
I haven't slept well. I've known some would judge me badly. But I do have a heart. What slowed me down at first was closing something dear to some elders. Then I saw that generations would lose open space access forever. Loneliness kills in all classes. In-person interactions for 15 to 24-year-olds dropped 70% over the last 20 years. You honor heartfelt stories from those lucky to come from local extended families. What about the rest of us? We coming from tiny mobile families didn't choose that. Never married, no kids. I've met all my friends through dancing. Beth was an only child of a war bride, never met her father. She raised her only child by herself. Her mother was an only child of a single father. Kate's father died when she was 10. Her mother passed when she was 19. None of her Wisconsin aunts and uncles stepped forward. Since she moved here 60 years ago, this has been her family tree. Deb, her 3 sisters, and her mother all got the breast cancer gene. Mother died when she was 4. 2 sisters died from uterine and breast cancer. Sister Jill had her uterus removed. Deb did not, then took years to die from uterine. Estranged Jill did not come down for her service. We scattered Deb's ashes on the Eno, where she loved to walk. Soccer moms with minivans don't live here. Nearly all of us are transient, single parents, or retired. And some of us are a bit dysfunctional. I've never had a live-in girlfriend. My dishwasher died 10 years ago and it just sits there. I've spent winter holidays by myself. Some of us are starved for the connections that could be made in a nearby park. Even if someone is a high-functioning hospital resident, why don't they deserve to breathe naturally cooled and cleaned air in their rare downtimes before they move away? Why must they drive to get to green space? Whichever acres you remove from this open space will be taken away forever from countless generations in crowded apartments on the south side of town, including on Jones Ferry and 54. Fewer connections will be made.
FYI, my name is Preciosa. The beautiful black girl that was in the video, that's my sister. Her name is Precious. She understood what was going on. She did. She did. Thank you. I did.
Thank you, Bob. Excuse me all. This will just be a reminder that during the public comment, we're going to be listening closely to the speakers, showing the respect that they deserve, but no comments from those who are here to listen, please. Next up, Chris Pendergrass.
Hi, I spoke at a previous meeting, but I want to briefly reintroduce myself. My name is Chris Pendergrass. I'm going to stand up straight, sorry. I've lived in Carrboro since 2012, and since 2015, I've been at Fidelity Court at 400 Davie Road in the townhomes. I came here as a student, and as I also shared last time, I stayed in the community since then. My grandfather grew up in Carrboro, and my great-uncle lived on Hillsborough Street his entire life, and he is buried at Westwood Cemetery along with several other of my family members. Nevertheless, I want to reiterate my support that the town designate the full field space next to the cemetery as a public park. Last time I spoke, I shared that the field space is accessible to the apartments, townhomes, and condos nearby in walking distance, using the quarter-mile standard commonly used as a measurement, in a way that Henry Anderson Park down Highway 54 and Wilson Park down North Greensboro Street are not. And while Town Commons is also nearby, it's much smaller, often occupied with public programming and farmers market events, and as such, serves a different role for the surrounding community. What I have spent more time learning about since I last spoke is the following. Research from our own universities nearby, at UNC and NC State, have demonstrated the public good and community health of accessible green space. We know that parks and green spaces create environments to support active lives and exercise opportunities, and they mitigate physical health risk factors, such as high cholesterol and obesity. We know that people who spend more time in nature enjoy reduced stress. We know that they are also less likely to display anxiety and depression, and more likely to report higher levels of happiness and well-being. We know parks provide spaces where people can gather and interact and build and deepen social relationships. We also know that these resources are often remain inequitably distributed across diverse communities, often with low income or social or racial and ethnic minority residents often experiencing limited access to quality facilities and quality spaces. I want to strongly advocate that the town designate the full field space next to the cemetery as a public park space for the physical and mental health and social vibrancy of the community. And I hope the town will capitalize on the opportunity to prioritize equity and walkability and access to such a space. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Deborah Gilmer. Is Deborah still here? Did she leave? Oh, I got you. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Betty Curry. Betty, where are you? Right in front of me. Betty, sit tight, actually. So what's going to happen is we have one more speaker after you, and then since you are, it looks like you were to speak on the parking. Oh. Parking. Were you here to, did you want to speak on the agenda item that we're having right after this? Okay.
But I wanted to speak to.
Well, you come right on up then. The floor is all yours. And Heidi, you're next.
No. Okay. Well, hi everybody.
Good evening.
How are you? I'm Betty Curry, a community leader as well as a commissioner for the Racial Equity Commission and Affordable Housing. And this situation with the park and the cemetery, I find to be very disgusting that we are even here. And one of the things that I wanted to speak to is the resolution that Carrboro talked about on record in supporting reparations for Black Carrboro. And I wanted to speak to that because Carrboro owes this community a great deal. And one of the things I wanted to touch on, I can't touch on all of them, but what I wanted to allude to simply due to this, what you affirmed. One, you declared, whereas Black people have been unjustly enslaved, segregated, and incarcerated, and whereas Black people have been systematically excluded from historic and present private economic development, the awarding of government contracts, and other community investments, therefore, Black-owned businesses have not received the benefits of these investments, and whereas Black people have been denied housing, home ownership opportunities through zoning laws and other racist practices in private real estate marketing, including redlining, steering, denying of mortgages, and gentrification, leading to displacements of residents in a vibrant, historical Black neighborhood. And I go down in conclusion, whereas systemic racism was created centuries ago and will take time to dismantle, and this resolution is the first step in that process. Whereas the town of Carrboro affirmed the dignity and humanity of each of our residents and the right of every resident to be free from discrimination and harm caused by action and speech and attitudes due to their race. And whereas the town of Carrboro is committed to working to eliminate the racial bias and the racial disparities, build trust in government and other institutions, and create more just and equitable world. And I say that to say, those people who want parks and want greenways, have some compassion. You know, people laid their loved ones to rest and they would like to have peace. Why can't you see that? My thing, I live here in Carrboro and I love Carrboro, but I see very little of me here. You know, so my thing is, I think y'all have enough, and you need to open up doors for all of us. You speak about unity. I don't see that. And so when we do really do that, then that's when we'll be able to all be in the park and enjoy each other. But I truly believe this whole debacle is due to those who feels entitled. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing those comments, Betty. Heidi, you're talking about crosswalks, and I assume that's not related to the parking. Okay.
Before you start the timer, I just have to say, Randy, I'm glad you are not concussed, but your helmet needs to be replaced. It's
Exactly.
done its job, but you need to replace it now.
Thank you for bringing that out. Even though it looks fine on the outside, it's cracked on the foam. Thank you.
So thank you. My name is Heidi Perry. I live at 407 Robert Hunt Drive. Last week, I noticed a crosswalk that was lovely installed at the intersection of Olin Forest Drive and Greensboro Street. I was a little surprised to only see one being put in. We now have a crosswalk at Wilson Park, at Bolin Forest, and at James Street. Those crosswalks are a half a mile apart, so not really encouraging a lot of people to use the streets. I thought they were going to put in more up and down Greensboro Street. I'm hoping this is not a one and done thing. I don't know what happened to the other ones, but it seemed like by economy of scale, it would have been better to do them all at the same time. So I'm just saying, if you really want to move people out of their cars and give them other options, you have to make it attractive. So that's my first thing about crosswalks. The other thing is that last week I was really disappointed to see that you moved forward the super street in front of Carrboro Plaza. I have to think maybe you don't know what a super street is, but it was a specific design that even according to NCDOT has a pedestrian level of service of F. They would not build a road with a level of service of F for cars, but this super street has a level of service for pedestrians of F because it will take longer than 60 seconds to cross that street. I hope that the MPO will remove that from the prioritization process. I noticed that in 2015 it was brought to you as an intersection improvement. In 2021, during the pandemic, which is why I probably didn't notice it, it came back to you as a super street, saying that it was going to give pedestrians a signal to cross. I'm just saying, it is not a signal to cross. It is a signal for people to get in their cars. Those were the two main things I wanted to say, but since I have a few seconds left, I also wanted to say, as you talk about getting people out of their cars and you give them incentives to ride the bus or to walk or to bike, and you talk about electric vehicles, please don't forget to talk about electric bikes. At the bike breakfast last week, the news shop in Carrboro, the electric speed shop, gave our officers, some of the firemen and the police, electric bikes to ride when they came over with our mayor, and they love them. I think that it would be great for our town to use this as a prototype. There is a shop in town that will rent them out by the week. It would be great for our town to use this, see how the staff uses it, get feedback. Anyway, thank you for all you do to move people and not just cars.
Thanks, Heidi.
Thank you, Heidi. Mr. Manager, would council be able to get an update on those crosswalks on Hillsborough at some point? And Greensboro, excuse me. And Barbara, did you have a question?
I thought when we were discussing about the super streets, I thought we were given a clarification about that night. I can't remember if it was it Tina, maybe? Okay. Well, thank you, Heidi. Thanks. Well, Trish is there. Do you have something that you want to add about that? Thank you.
Trish McGuire, Planning Director. Yeah, I think what Tina said was that we were keeping the project because it's an opportunity for us to evaluate whether some type of improvement, they've changed the name of the super street. Tina shared it with you last week, and I can't remember. It's a reduced conflict. Yes. Thank you, Heidi. And so, it's we don't know how it will score. We don't know, but it gives us a project to keep there to see if we can make it make it a series of improvements that work for the town. And if it doesn't, then we would not go forward with it. So we would not support it going forward. So That's the reasoning that was provided to you last
Okay.
week, and that's the framing of it that we are offering for you to consider, still, so.
Sammy.
Since you're up here, I'm not sure the crosswalks, is that in your department or is that public work?
The crosswalk project is one that several departments kind of are coordinating with DOT, with a subcontractor that they have to install them. There's a series of them that have been in our pedestrian improvements list for, honestly, 2.5 years, I think. And there have been, you probably have seen in other locations, some refurbishments of the ramps associated with crossings and some crosswalks going in. So.
Is Greensboro getting more?
There are a couple of other locations that are identified in the list, and we're checking on the status of that particular one as we heard about it going in and following up. So hopefully we'll have a little bit more of an update on that in relation to the others. We're working on the transportation projects update to post to you guys relatively soon, so that'll be part of that information.
Right. Thank you, Trish. Appreciate it. And Wesley, did I miss a speaker?
No, one that just sent a message, and I just want to make sure we got that before.
Sure.
I have one, forgive me if I pronounce it incorrectly, Cristobal Palmer.
Yes, absolutely. Three minutes, please, Christopher.
I'm going to be as quick as I can.
Thank you.
So I didn't actually plan to speak tonight, but I got in my mailbox with no postage, not in an envelope, a magnet from some folks that had a QR code and a website promoting the use of, as they call it, Fidelity Meadow as a park. I found this very irksome and offensive that they would presume to not pay postage and use my mailbox to try to recruit me to add a park. And I do this in part, I'm upset about this in part because I've been canvassing. I've been very carefully going to people's doors, not their mailboxes, to promote the completion of the Bowling Creek Greenway. And so it's very upsetting to me. I bothered to, before I showed up, look into this property and its history, and am upset, as with many of the people who've come up, at the injustice. And I'm also upset because I spent years living in Fidelity Court and refraining from walking my dog in that space, refraining from playing in that space, because it was marked as a cemetery. So the presumption of the people who claim that it is or has been a meadow for their play is galling. I'm very frustrated, and I'm sorry. I'm going to take a deep breath and express my enthusiasm for completing the Bowling Creek Greenway. Please, if you want to add green space, let's act on something that's been in the works since 2009. Before, let's complete the Bowling Creek Greenway. Let's give people options to connect to schools, other neighborhoods, green space. I'm enthusiastic about that. Let's do that. Thanks.
Thank you, Christopher. Thank you. I believe that completes public comments.
That's all I have.
Okay. Thank you all again for sharing all those comments. Oh, I'm sorry. Was there one more? Yes, please. And ma'am, as you come to the microphone, if you can share with us your name, that would be great since I don't have you on our roster.
My name is Jane Garrett, and I'm speaking on a personal perspective in regards to the cemetery itself. I'm a native of Carrboro as well as my family. I moved into the Davie Road Fidelity Court neighborhood at the age of 6 when my parents built a house on Alabama Avenue. Then that's over 60 years ago. Given its close proximity to Carrboro Elementary, as a youth, I had to walk to and fro to school. I have memories of how safe I felt as I walked through the cemetery. Also, how peaceful it is now, or up until this past Saturday, as I visit the graves of my mother, who's been there since November, 2 grandmothers, a great-grandmother, a grandfather, and an uncle. It was very pleasant to go there and be at peace. When I arrived on Saturday, there were families already up in that area playing around, children laughing, and it was disturbing to me because my visits with my relatives laid to rest was no longer peaceful, and the sadness that no reverence is given to those laying at rest. My father has a plot there, and my husband and myself just recently purchased plots there in February due to the fact that the cemetery was well maintained and serene. And my hope is that it would remain that way. I had no idea at the time that we purchased the plots that a park was even being considered in that area. Land is sparse in town, and this lot is in direct proximity to the current cemetery. So in my view, given that we need more spaces for cemeteries, logically, the best use of this property is to expand the existing cemetery. Thank you.
Thank you for making those comments, Ms. Garrett. And I want to again thank everybody for being here. A lot of the comments focused this evening on the Westwood Cemetery. Mr. Manager, the work session is scheduled for June 15th. That will be a work session just with council members as we talk about possible renovations, possible expansions, deciding the future of the Westwood Cemetery, having those conversations. The public is certainly welcome to the work session, but there will not be any public comments at that work session, so I don't want you to come thinking you can share comments that evening. But there will be a public hearing on Westwood at a date still to be determined. So thank you all again. I'm going to throw things back to you, Mr. Manager, in terms of next item on the agenda.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Moving on to the consent agenda. The first item is the approval of the September 13th, 2022 minutes with changes by Mayor Pro Tem Romaine. The next item, that's the only item on this consent agenda.
Sammy, you moved, and Eleazar, is that a second?
Yeah.
Sammy moved the consent agenda. Eleazar seconded. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay. Mr. Manager.
The first item on the other matters is the implementation of Carrboro Connects Chapter 5, Strategy 4.2, reduce negative effects of parking requirements on housing costs and natural resources. The purpose of this agenda item is to provide the Town Council with a report on the implementation of Carrboro Connect's Transportation and Mobility Strategy 4.2, reduce negative effects of parking requirements on housing costs and natural resources. And our Planning Director, Trish McGuire, will provide a presentation of the item.
It's going to take a moment. Where am I in the alphabet? Excuse me. This wouldn't open earlier. Oh, I know. My apologies. Sorry about that. Good evening, everyone. I'm here to provide a report on our ongoing work to update the town's residential parking requirements. I'm going to briefly review our current parking requirements for everyone, talk about some proposed changes, identify a schedule for what's next that's proposed in the agenda item, and then hopefully you guys will have some feedback for staff on this particular topic. I do want to begin for everybody here, just where's the direction for these changes coming from. This specifically is part of our recently adopted comprehensive plan, which identified a number of changes to parking, both the way parking is managed downtown, as well as specifically how the town's parking requirements in our land use ordinance interplay with new development and permitting development. So the focus of tonight's item is really on the second part, which is the town's regulations, in some of them in relation to how we permit development and require parking in association with it. And as you all know, our economic development director is working specifically on the downtown parking effort, a downtown parking management project, and we're working closely on issues related to parking for the town. So we'll continue to do that as these projects do intersect as well. So changes were in the comprehensive plan were identified as a priority project. Those 150 priority projects that were identified through specifically and raised up or elevated because of their specific potential to advance the foundations of the plan, racial equity and climate action. And at your retreat in January, the council re-emphasized this particular project as one for implementation in the next 12 to 18 months. So the purpose of this, us pursuing this, is because why it was identified as a priority is to reduce the negative effects of parking requirements on things like the cost of development, specifically the cost of housing, impacts on natural resources, and generally to let people have more leeway in the way they devote land to the storage of vehicles when in association with development, rather than the town's regulations dictating a specific approach. And in so doing, recognize the relationship between those choices and how the land might be used in other ways, how that links into other programs and actions that the town takes, but also the actions and interests of individual property owners in town. The town's current regulations are housed in Article 18 of the Land Use Ordinance. Our ordinance establishes a presumptive standard. So what that means is if you meet the standard that we've described for a variety of land uses, you're presumed to provide enough parking for that activity. So it isn't specifically a minimum parking requirement, but it is a presumption of you're satisfying the demand, the expected demand for a particular land use. And if you thumb through this and recall agenda items that have come before you and the community as well, there have been many changes and updates to this section in recent years, and things specifically that have been changed relate to bicycle parking, EV charging stations, and also ways to reduce parking requirements. So essentially, the Article 18 designates a standard number of spaces that are assigned or needed, expected to, again, meet demand for particular use classifications. And the numbers over here on the left in this excerpt from the land use ordinance are just the numbers that we use to define a particular use. So the one uses are all residential uses in the town's land use ordinance. And so here you see a single family type of residence at the beginning, in the first category, and then we go down from there for duplexes and into multifamily types of residential uses. And that's sort of an example of how it works throughout the various other types of commercial uses, office uses, public uses, and so forth. So the ordinance specifically, in identifying a presumptive approach to the parking, it also says that there can be negative effects of providing too much parking or too little, depending on how it might impact surrounding land uses, the town's public rights of way, other property owners. And so the ordinance requires that it be flexibly administered, and that we not see that there's only one way to do this. But instead, the town could, in the permit issuing authority, can require more or allow fewer parking spaces than are specified. There are a number of downsides to the requirements. I think as noted, they have impacts on other types of things, types of development. They affect impervious surface. They can limit land being used for other things. And those conditions have led to the desire to update them. And specifically with this particular project related to residential developments, remove some of them. So this work does come directly from that strategy in Carrboro Connects. And in Chapter 11, where we kind of had done that series of steps or summary of steps that might be used to implement these projects, set out a list of activities that we might follow to begin to implement them. So we have been working to determine the best way to go about removing the parking requirements in town, and specifically for this project, residential development close to transit. Now, I'm saying close to transit sort of in air quotes there because it was a term that was established in the comp plan and defined specifically there. So we're currently in the analysis stage of this, and what we shared with you in this report is information about that close to transit. What does that look like in town? What do these standards look like? What are some considerations related to how you might proceed? So we can take your feedback on these points and this discussion and turn it into a draft ordinance to bring it back so we can move forward. Let's see. And just noting that this is the the specific language in Carrboro Connects Strategy 4.2, removing that residential parking requirement for projects that are close to transit. And then you can see over there on the right-hand side of the column, just this identification of what are those areas that meet that standard, one of the first steps. So we spend a little bit of time on that activity. And as you are familiar, I think, Chapel Hill Transit is our principal transit provider in town. We have a number of routes that serve different parts of the community. And the service levels have varied somewhat because of as a result of COVID ridership, and we are seeing those transit routes becoming more like normal levels of service. At the present time, I think one route, either CM or CW, doesn't have any limitations on its prescribed service. There's one weekday portion of one of those two routes that isn't yet at full service, but those are the closest to meeting the standard that's spelled out in Carrboro Connects. The other routes we have in town, the J, the F, the HS, the JFX Express route, and the N, are not yet meeting the level of service that's defined in Carrboro Connects. So we have. I also note that tying a land use ordinance change to the level of service may present some challenges for this very reason, where there can be variability in a stop not being served at one point versus another, and some properties very close in proximity to one another having sort of a different requirement applied to them if we say it's based on that. So we're really thinking that we're probably going to look below that, back to the zoning districts that are within the areas where transit is typically provided, as opposed to something like the level of service as a way to move forward here. So we don't run into some changing variable there that a staff person is going to have to go and find and check, and then it turns out this at one point in time it may vary because of. I don't think we'll have a condition like COVID going forward again, but we don't really know. So just taking a little bit a step below the level of service is the way we define that might be the best approach. Yeah.
Can I ask a question real quick?
Yes, indeed.
So the close to transit analysis, so we have meets standard, does not currently meet standard, and then we have does not meet standard. And so all these are, of course, the current conditions. So if not now, potentially later, is there any account taken for changes that may very well occur and bring them up to meet the standard? You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Yes, precisely. And that's kind of that's sort of the point I was trying to make just a moment ago. In that really, if we look at the areas where we do have service and where we can begin, rather than tying it to the level of service itself, we may want to go to the transit area, the transit service area, rather than the half mile with the frequency that's defined in the comp plan. It will give us more. It will cover a larger area, but it will also create. It'll set a more uniform stage for, establishing a regulation that's going to apply in town.
And so changing how it's defined. It would mean essentially. If we use a different definition to include in a land use ordinance amendment, there will be a kind of an amendment to the comp plan that would relate to that definitional change too. But that would all be. It's not difficult to do that. It would just be something that we would proceed with. All right, good to know. Thank you.
So there are some potential strategies that, you know, our typical tools to apply to changes to these types of regulations are text amendments. And so there's a couple of options that are defined here or identified here related to the things that are discussed in the comp plan and things that some of you have noted and you know, we've explored further in checking with other local governments that are around relatively close to where we are. But those are reducing minimums by a particular amount, minimums becoming maximums, removing them altogether, setting some type of performance standard, linking some changes to other things that we want to see. That's done in some other parts of our land use ordinance.
Trish, could you give one example of that?
A performance standard?
Of that, the type of link that you're thinking of?
Well, I mean, if it's, I'll use the example in the B1C, or excuse me, the B1G conditional zoning district. Additional density was provided for that neighborhood that was developed at Shelton Station, and it was linked to a series of sustainability and green building construction standards and some other features like that. Mm-hmm. So on a smaller scale, it might be that someone does build a rain garden, and you know they may actually do something like that, or they may have an increase in the amount of tree cover that they put on a residential lot, or it might be that they create some renewable energy, installation. Things like that could be considered, and they may not be this may be something that's more appropriate at a larger scale of development rather than a smaller scale. Maybe not at the single home or the couple of homes on a lot scale, but at a larger scale, it might be something to consider. We've noted that the flexible administration provision is, as it's written, doesn't have kind of a lot of specificity about how that decision is made. If that's a piece of the regulations that is of interest to you to have us to explore continuing to include it in the regulations, we'd want to just look closely at the language and make sure it does what we want it to do, that it's usable and clear. We also looked at a transit overlay district, the use of some type of map amendment linked to where, like this transit service area. It's a more intensive process in that it does create a map change. It's a little bit less easy to change it if the boundaries change because service is changing. So we have to go through that process of making a map change, notifying all the property owners, et cetera. So it's a more elaborate, more detailed process in that regard. And then looking at some kind of possibly phased implementation of this, going from something to half of something to nothing, or taking pieces. We are to some degree we are talking about a phased implementation right now because we're focusing primarily on residential land uses in this agenda item, and not at others. So. Both throughout town as well as in the downtown. So just some example here is to kind of dig in a little bit on the idea of if we were to take that service area. So this is the half mile, the map of the close to transit half mile buffer. And since the J is close to meeting the service level but not meeting it right now, this buffer does include the CW, the CM, and the J routes. So you can see what we've done is just listed essentially on the slide here the zoning districts that are included within that buffer and the kinds of residential uses that are permissible. And if we were to make a change, we might be creating a change that says for these residential uses within these zoning districts, the change to the ordinance is now whatever it might be. Again, that there is no minimum, there's a maximum, et cetera. So, to summarize, just the steps that we've sort of gone through is looking at our ordinance, looking at what the comp plan is trying to focus on here in this particular item, and specifically these changes to residential parking requirements, and then some possible changes to consider, ending with the expectation that we'll be monitoring results and responding accordingly as we go forward, rather than seeing this as a change that's done, because I think it's going to interplay with other other things that we're looking at, like residential density, changes to residential density, and other things that are in the comp plan as we go forward. Some considerations, is this transit service area? We're not extensively meeting it everywhere in town yet, but we could use the base zoning approach to reconcile that. There obviously is an opportunity for a systems approach here, thinking about the stormwater impacts, the other interests that we have, climate action, tree, carbon sequestration, value like that, et cetera. We've got many transit, bicycle, and pedestrian improvements projects that are in the works. And so the relationship of these kinds of changes, which are deal with one aspect of the transportation system to some degree as the basic origin for it, does of course link with these others. Just the ongoing parking management updates and work that you heard about last week, and we will continue to be working closely together on that. Just the streetscape issue, the map that was provided for you did indicate that we have a number of streets in town that are fairly narrow in width, and just the basic ability for emergency services is an obligation that comes to the town, a responsibility that comes to the town through the fire code, not specifically spelled out in our land use ordinance in terms of making sure those are clear. So just something to keep in mind, being aware of it, and if we have to respond because we start to have an issue, being ready to do that. And then the question of enforcement, if there is an overflow or spillover effect. What's next to the schedule that we provided in the agenda item is just up here on the slide, looking to have a draft ordinance in front of you in about a month in June, and then doing some public engagement during the summer, sharing information about how these changes might work, what they might look like, engaging with the community, using inclusive Carrboro strategies to be sure we get a good understanding in the community of things that are coming forward for you all to consider. And then it says fall, but it really would be late summer, anticipating early September advisory board review, and then a public hearing that month. So happy to answer any questions. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Trish. That was really helpful. A lot of material here. Before we jump in, Danny, Betty, I know that you were signed up to talk about parking, and did you want to share 3 minutes of comments on the parking? This would be a great time for that. Thank you for hanging in there.
I was going over the item to reduce negative effects of parking and requirements on housing costs. One of the things I wanted to bring up, thank you for listening, in regards to low-income communities that I represent, and what has happened in these communities when it comes to parking. It's more of a burden than an asset, because what happens is, in these particular communities, believe it or not, they have police officers come in the community and they check tags, and they make sure the tags are legit and that, they belong there. And as a result of that, then punishment is involved. They get fines, they get their cars towed, and a lot of things happen in these particular communities. Also, where I live, we have to pay for parking is included in our rent if we want to rent a reserve space, which is another burden, because now we have to, in order to have a parking space, because a lot of people park there because that's free parking, and so that takes away from the residents, in which, in order to have a space and not be parked way up the hill, you have to actually pay to have privacy in the fronts of your doors. So going forward, I would hope that maybe when they do consider building complexes or whatever, that they designate parking spots for the residents, and that's automatic inclusion versus obligation, because on top of paying all these other fees, now I got to worry about my car, sitting out in front of my door. So I just wanted to bring light to that. Also with the busing situation in some communities, that buses don't go, so that's also an inconvenience. Not everybody has accessibility to bikes and electric bikes, and or even ride bikes. So they're using their vehicles because that's all they have. They don't wish to do what others wish to do. So I think it's unfair that it just gets designated to a group of people who normally does these things versus people who have hardship and just trying to have their cars parked in their community, and having police officers harass them in such a way. So I just would like that to be considered when you're talking about inclusion, because that's not exactly what's happening. We're excluded, and a lot of things that's going on doesn't apply to the community I represent. So just going forward, you know, if we're going to have inclusion, then we need to have meetings for everybody to be a part of. If we're going to have bike events, then everybody should have that opportunity to know about the bike events. And I find that here in this community, we are pocketing different events, and a lot of people don't know what's happening. So when one says we are involved in community, it's always been a question of what community, because the community I stand by never gets represented. So, and that's all I had to say.
Right on time. Right on the money. Thank you for sharing those comments. It is really important to have your voice here, Betty. And part of this process will be also advisory board review that we'll be talking about later in the evening, and making sure that we are reaching as many communities as we possibly can. But I appreciate you being here. Before we jump in, Trish, I wondered if you wanted to spend just a moment in terms of how we can be most productive to you this evening. What specific types of feedback? I know there was the slide, but if you could just sort of frame our conversation this evening in terms of what's going to be most helpful for you as we move this forward.
Well, I think just the acknowledgement that the service doesn't meet what's in Carrboro Connects, and that we need to, respond to that, and you're ready to go forward. I think that's an important kind of conclusion to reach, if that's what you'd like to do, so that's a very clear policy, direction to provide to us. And again, I think if there's an interest in there not being a parking requirement, there not being a minimum requirement, and us shifting away from that presumption to something else. I think that would be very clear. If you're comfortable with seeing a couple of options, something that's a reduction of what we have now, as well as that for us to provide to you, we can provide that for you to consider. In a couple of weeks when we bring it back to set the hearing. So I think those are the two major points to make. I think, well, I guess there's one third one, and that is, I think there's a little bit of, I'd like for us to be able to explore the question of removing the minimums in the commercial zoning districts, because of the interrelationship between the payment in lieu option that we have in the ordinance now, and how that might play into the downtown parking, municipal district, management, downtown parking management, et cetera, as it goes forward. So if you have any willingness for us to explore that further in terms of flexibility, that would be a helpful little bit of feedback, I think, too. Let's see, there was one other thing I think I thought of, but I can't remember it right this second, so if it comes to me, I'll share it. But those points would be great.
Okay, great. Okay, so we will jump in. Danny, I saw your hand up first, and then Randy, and then we'll all listen in, and I'll keep my eyes open to the left because I don't always look that way. So just nudge me if I don't see you. Start us off, Danny.
Thank you, Susan. And thank you, Trish, for raising the issue of the commercial. I was curious about that. I had thought that our discussion on 328 did specify commercial downtown.
Yes.
And so is the thinking here that I certainly have an appetite for reducing the minimums in commercial downtown. Is the thinking here that would be better served as part of the small area plan that is perhaps coming, or I guess certainly coming, given what we are discussing with the budget and the improvement and the, or should we just go ahead and reduce that sucker now?
Well, so my understanding was that you wanted the question that was asked was to clarify whether the reduction of residential parking in those commercial zoning districts was what you wanted. I did not understand you were talking about non-residential uses in the downtown. So if that was an error on my part in hearing it, perhaps others too, and us hearing that. I thought we were talking about the residential uses in the downtown, not all of the uses.
I think
But-
I think there was ambiguity due to
Was.
the improvement district discussion. So I mean, I guess where I'm getting is I think we have that appetite for sure, but maybe it is better put as part of the improvement district discussion, right?
And certainly, I mean, it is a topic that can be explored as part of the downtown master plan too. So it can be done in steps, but yeah.
Okay, so just first to thank you for bringing that up and to say that yes, I do think that we have that appetite, but that it's probably most appropriate as part of the improvement district discussion. Second, so this is getting less into questions and more into how I read this. So the big problem with the transit as it stands is really the 7-day service that Carrboro Connects outlines. And I take it that one of the options we can consider in the way that Trish has framed this for us is we could just move that down to 5 days. If we moved that down to 5 days, then that would bring in all of the lines not currently meeting the standard and all of the lines not meeting the standard period, including what's most important to me here, well, not most, but very important to me, is the HS. The HS is the one that runs out to Morris Grove and Eubanks Road. And I think right now that's probably not like a load-bearing part of town for this discussion, but over the medium term, as we look at possible green track developments, particularly, we would want to have that part of town conform to our thinking as far as the rest of the town. So I think what we should do is to use, I personally am comfortable continuing to use the zoning approach. I think it does sound to me like the transit overlay district is a little bit onerous. But if we used the map as outlined in the Chapel Hill Transit Short Range Transit Plan, in 2020, I believe they adopted, I'm looking at page 72 of that for the public and for our records. That would include the HS, J, CW, CM, JFX. Basically, it would get sort of the extended version of what we're talking about. And I think if we did that, combined with the districts represented by that map, just as we're doing now, rather than a transit overlay. Yeah, 5 days a week. So that would, all of those routes are serviced at least 5 days a week, which I believe is the minimum within the jurisdiction regardless. So to be more concise, not a strength, I would just change the transit to 5 days, continue with the zoning approach represented there using the Chapel Hill Transit Short Range Transit Plan. I am very interested in simply removing the presumptive standard. I think, I am friendly to the idea of maximums myself. I've talked with some of y'all about this, but ultimately I think that the more equitable solution is to just remove the presumptive standard. I think when we get into maximums, we start to potentially have some negative equity externalities. I think as we talk about parts of town that maybe are more intergenerational or more car dependent, maximums start to become more the issue than minimums. Where we're really trying to address here in our sort of denser development, I think it's the lack of a minimum that's currently setting us back. So all to say, I would like to remove the presumptive standard entirely. And I don't believe that I see an advantage to a phased implementation. I think since we're considering only new development, I mean, I say only, but I don't think this will be tremendously complicating for most day-to-day experiences in town. And that's what I got.
Danny, just to recap real quickly in terms of the points that you were making. So the commercial minimums would become part of the downtown improvement district.
Mm-hmm.
We would move transit rather than the 7 days to 5 days. Remove presumptive standards altogether. And just for my clarification, does that mean we're basically saying no minimums, no maximums? So that's why we don't need presumptive standards?
I would be interested perhaps in some public engagement around the question of maximums particularly. If maximums I think are the most aggressive possible climate policy is to set a maximum. And if it turns out that people do not find that particularly burdensome or onerous, if it does not pose real equity challenges for, say, intergenerational or car-dependent families, then I would be interested in maximums. But I think ultimately I think the simplest thing is to just remove the presumptive standard entirely.
And for all of the resident, I mean, the multifamily apartment development as well?
Yes, that would be my, that, to my mind, we haven't yet seen a project where developers struggle to calibrate their need for parking. And I think, we ask so much of our planning department, as we know, that I think streamlining this process is sort of in fitting with our broader organizational goals, and that the fewer necessities for flexible administration we have, the more efficient we will be. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think I had Randy next and then Sammy.
Okay. I really like the idea of removing the minimum. I think that it gives a lot of flexibility to things that we want to do. And I really appreciate the way this has been laid out in the work that you all have done. And I was particularly taken, so as I feel like we need proof of concept. I think it's a great concept, but I'm going to take out the word but. And when I read through the pocket questions, I was concerned because first of all, I'm seeing, and I want to praise all the staff, the work that is now being done on the pocket questions. They're very meaningful, and I can see as we move forward, they're becoming much more, they're becoming really clear to purpose, and they really help inform my reading of what we have. And I'm going to give you the example. Because the pocket questions, let's just take the closeness to transit, a half mile, 7-day service, and the 30-minute intervals. Now, I sit on the Chapel Hill Transit, and I know how hard not only the transit partners work, but the operators, and the entire operation is stellar. It really is. But they have challenges that we here don't always see, except for when they have to cut service or they have to reroute service. And for that reason, I'm concerned that we look very carefully at, where on the transit routes this could be impactful. And as this refers to new development, I'm not exactly sure we know exactly where that is at this time. But I do feel that we have a mechanism to engage the public and go to the community that is most representative of being on a transit line now, and what are their needs, what are their concerns. Listening to Betty was very helpful. I'm completely shocked that she's paying for her parking on top of her own rent. We want to avoid that. We don't want folks who are in moderate or low to moderate income housing to have to pay on top of their rent. And that seems to be something that she didn't expect to have to do. So where does that fit into this? When I read in the first paragraph where it says impacts of the reduction could benefit and harm, I want to know what are the harms. I want them enumerated. And that's one of the questions that has to be brought to public. Second, who will experience the burden? from my reading of the paragraph and from what you had said, Trish, and I agree with you 100%, perhaps we are not, our infrastructure is not ready. The readiness isn't there. So what I would want to know, what is the timeline? What is an honest timeline for readiness? And how will we know to set up for that when the developments have not been built yet? In other words, what is the anticipated areas where we need that infrastructure where it right now does not exist, and the level of service? Because I think that is an honest to goodness challenge. Third, so the infrastructure is not baked in right now. We need to anticipate where should it go and what could it look like. And by going to community folks, whether it's in Collins Crossing or Barn Street or wherever, and saying to folks, how do you use the transit? What do you need? What could be better? Because we heard from Liz on the REC about having a shelter, a bus shelter. It sounds like a simple thing, but it's going to be a couple years out. And between now and then, students who are going to the high school or wherever they're going on those buses to the schools, they're standing in the rain. So, I mean, there is a really pragmatic piece to this that begs the proof of concept. The performance standard, I think you gave a good response about that, but I agree we need to really clarify what that is. And phased-in implementation, I think, is going to be part of what we do in terms of due diligence, instead of expecting that because we say it's so, it will be. So I would support phasing it in. And I agree with Danny 100% about looking at the commercial and identifying it and tying it to the improvement, the economic improvement district. That makes a lot of sense. I think almost that should come ahead of everything else. I do question the 5 days. There are hospital workers who work schedules I can't even imagine, that if they don't have 7-day service, they will be able to get to their housekeeping work or their hospital work. And we can't make an assumption because 5 days works for us. It's going to work for folks who have shift work. So I would still stick with the 7-day expectation. But more than anything else, this has to be front-loaded with community engagement and assessment and evaluation. Were we to begin, I would like to see an annual assessment for how it's going, to be sure that we're not leaving anyone behind or causing folks to have hidden costs. When Betty talked about that cost, I thought of all the residents to have to pay more to park because they are car dependent. Why on earth would we find ourselves in a situation where it's folks who are in the moderate and low income housing? So I want to be really careful about that, because the comprehensive plan is predicated on that level of understanding equity. Thanks.
Thank you, Randy. Semi.
Thanks for the presentation, Trish, and all the information that you and staff have put together. I appreciate it. It's exciting to see this comprehensive plan item being brought before us. I agree with Randy in terms of the importance of once this is implemented, making sure it's working. I'm for implementing it. And a lot of times there's analysis paralysis and we don't get to actually implementing anything. But in lieu of not doing all that analysis, I think, especially since development happens over time and slowly, we will be able to see it change and the problems that need to be addressed and accordingly adjust. And for that reason, I wouldn't be averse to being aligned with climate and saying converting the minimums to maximums. I would be in favor of that approach. In terms of what areas of town, I'm intrigued by Danny's proposal of changing the definition of proximity to transit to 5 days, and that would make it easier to just zone instead of having an overlay district. I don't have a hard preference one way. I'm leaning towards what he was proposing in terms of changing the definition so that it's more inclusive of all of our town, and doing it through the zoning. But one way or another, I would like for us to really be thinking of maximums. I also really appreciate the street width map. Along with that, I'd be interested in seeing kind of which one of those streets are, if they're all two-way streets or one-way. Because at some point, I think it would behoove us to do an analysis about on-street parking opportunities. And as much as we're talking about employees parking outside of the downtown, we have some streets that are super wide and proximate to transit that could, in essence, function as park and ride spaces. So I'm thinking like Oleander, it's green, and I've been there. Those roads are highways, and they're hardly used. And I think we could make use of that public infrastructure in a better way, and take a lot of pressure on the parking needs that we perceive to have, but may not. I definitely am in favor of linking the changes to commercial parking in the downtown to our downtown access district. I think it is, as we take that requirement away, we need to have the continued buy-in of downtown property owners in their participation of providing access, whether that be facilities for biking, walking, supporting our transit, or parking as a last resort. So those are my comments for now. In terms of timing, I think, it wouldn't hurt over the summer to get feedback. I do look forward to seeing some kind of draft that we could approve of in fall.
Just a point of clarification, if I could. The draft would come on June 20th, right? And then the draft would go.
Oh, okay.
So
Wow,
we're doing good here on timing. That's which rules.
Better.
Yeah, I mean, there may be, responses, and the advisory boards would look at it, in early September.
Yeah, that sounds great.
So what is phased implementation possible? Sorry, if I may. I'm curious. I expressed skepticism of the necessity of phased implementation, but it sounds like maybe I'm solo on that, which is reasonable. If we're being pretty action oriented here, we get this resolution on the 20th. We remove the presumptive standard 5 days. We want some things to study. What is a reasonable phased implementation? What makes good sense, do we think, to direct them?
I didn't hear a phased implementation.
I mean, it's just really an idea. Again, if you were to go with the 7 and then change to the 5, just looking at this map, this is the buffer that is at or close to meeting the definition. This is the HS route, up here. This is the F route here. So this buffer is going to go, out here for the F, and it will capture some additional zoning districts. And as I said, the concept is that we would use the zoning districts, not just the area that's covered by that buffer, as the basis for the changes. Sorry, I lost my cursor. Where are you? There you go. So, there'd be a buffer around the HS route here that would, this is all Carolina North, but anyway, cover this part of town here. So that's within the 5 day, but not the 7 day, both the F and the HS. So anyway, and right now the J is not in there either. So, but it would include a couple of additional zoning districts. It would include the RR. It would include the HHRR, the Historic Rogers Road, or the HRR, Historic Rogers Residential. So we would add a couple of additional zoning districts to apply it to. But, you know, you could put them all in together at the beginning as well.
Eleazar.
Thank you, Madam Pro Tem, and thank you, Council Member, for bringing that up, because I was actually going to ask. I was trying to think what that phase implementation, and just so that I understand, we haven't seen that proposal come to us. It would be part of whatever comes in June 20th of what staff thinks is the best way to move forward.
We have not prepared a draft yet. That would be sort of taking the feedback we received tonight and preparing that for you and bringing it back in June.
Yeah, and I guess what I want to know is maybe it would be a good moment at that time to let us know what is the difference, or what would the implications of a phased rollout or just all at once. And I would like to see that, because I'm also of the mind of Councilmember now of putting it all over at once instead of doing that phase implementation. But I also want to see what the any possible repercussions on that would be. Unintended consequences, that's what I'm. Thank you. Thank you, Madam.
Danny, go ahead.
So it strikes me that one thing we could do, trying to kind of get to some consensus here quickly-ish, incorporating different things, is hearing some appetite for maximums. If we established maximums within, I mean, so on the one hand, I do want to encourage us to push this pretty quickly. You know, like towns both smaller and larger have done this, and there have not been negative externalities. So, you know, I think that's important to keep in mind. But you know, like maybe we should consider maximums, changing the minimums to maximums within the 7-day window, and putting a time window on. If we, you know, like if all goes well, then it'll go to the 5-day service window within a year.
Oh, I see what
Why?
So as to phase implementation, to try and address some of your concerns, to get some of the proof of concept and make sure that we're not causing any unintended negative.
But why from why would you reduce down from 7? I mean, why is?
Well, because the 7-day service window is smaller than the 5-day service window. So if we had the maximums within the 7-day service window and observed no negative impacts, then expanding it to the 5-day service window would be expanding the footprint of that program.
But then we'd have to have the right tool to evaluate whether or not who does it impact? That would be my question. And how do we know that they're not negatively impacted? You see what I'm saying? I mean, because if somebody is a shift worker at the hospital or on campus, there may be a very small number, but they're significant because they matter. And that's the only reason I'm saying when 5 to 7, but we're shifting down from 7 to 5 is basically saying if you work on weekends, you're on your own. And that's not being inclusive.
Well, I don't follow.
Have I got it wrong, Trish, or tell me?
No, I think that, you know, the possible negative externalities are kind of compressed. You know, they're compressed in time because we wanted to consider what could be unintended consequences. You know, what might they be? So I do think that we understand that there isn't a tremendously fast level of development where we would see a big change occurring. And so, you know, and that is not to say that there would not potentially be some instance that we encounter that actually presents a problem, you know, where there is an overflow, there is something that causes an impact to some other property or to the public, you know, realm, for example. But I think that, you know, let me step back and say, what I'm saying might argue for us to go with the larger area to begin with, so that we can examine how this applies in very different places, because there are parts of town that are very different from one another. You know, Windwood is very different from Rogers Road. You know, the development there is different, and so you have the most expansive understanding of the change. Might be better to go bigger, you know, to start with, and then really have a tool like you were describing that would say, you know, how do you how is this happening? How's this working? You know, what's happening when a property is being developed or redeveloped? You know, people get permits for adding additions, and this is where the infill piece of it, you know, that's where there might be some rubs. It's like, what are people doing when they're filling in the spaces that were formerly their driveways with, you know, an addition or something like that? So that's where you might have a concern, right? You run out of space for certain things. So, is that making sense? So, anyway, I think it would argue to be able to assess the potential impacts over the range of types of development we have. It may be better to go bigger.
Couple things from me, and then we'll need to. And then I'll, once I finish, I wanted to reach out to everybody for a couple of questions. So, Trish, I noticed in Raleigh they have added parking maximums, and they've also added minimum requirements for secured covered bicycle parking. And I wanted to throw out that idea of including that piece to this whole package.
And we do have covered parking for bicycle requirements currently. So you do compare to what Raleigh is doing and then kind of see if it might be a good example?
That would be great.
Okay, sure.
The next question is, so you're going to still need from us, assuming we're in support of this, you would need from us a motion to change the text in the comprehensive plan? Did I understand that correctly?
I mean, I don't think you need to provide that.
No.
I think that when we bring a text amendment forward to you, you know, at that point, when you have a hearing and you have to adopt it, you have to do the resolution of consistency. And in there, if it's different from the policy that's in the plan, we would do it with that.
Okay. Okay, great.
Right, Nick?
And do I have that right, Nick? Okay. And Randy?
Yeah, I have a what-if question for council, which is, okay, so what if a developer says, you know, we are going to have maximums on the parking for the residential, but we would like, in addition to having maximums, we want X number of spaces for zip cars or something, you know, zip cars. So, you know, I want to be sure that we're flexible enough so that if there's other microtransit options, that we don't paint ourselves into a corner. So Trish, that's the only thing I would ask. I mean, I remember how much we talked about at Shelton Station having zip cars, and I don't even remember what happened that didn't happen. But it's a very good option, folks who, this came up when we were talking about South Green last week. And so I'm just raising this question now, that if we have maximums, what do we do if the developer says, well, you know, what if I want X number of spaces for zip cars? So I just want to be thinking ahead that way.
So, I was just going to add, Randy, I know that Raleigh has been dealing with this as well, where with the maximums, if the developer wanted to go beyond, they were asking the developer to do these various options that the developer can do to sort of mitigate the effects of the additional parking. So that may be another place to look. Sammy.
I guess one question is, since we're changing our minimums to maximums and our minimums currently are presumptive, are we also assuming that the maximums would be presumptive?
That's one approach that we have.
Or it could just be hard and tied to performance standards if they wanted to go above a maximum. Could be another way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, we could make the presumptive standard the maximum standard. We have to, we're going to play with that a little bit.
Okay.
Look into it a little bit more
But
closely.
I do like the model that Susan pointed out in terms of like carrots in exchange for. So, you know, I've never seen a development that's asked us to go above minimums.
The minimums.
You know.
Anything else? Okay.
I wanted to give a shout out to the team who've worked with me on this agenda item, which I meant to do at the beginning, Ben Berelsheimer, who many of you know from the from the comp plan, but Duncan Dodson, who's a new planner with us since last September, and then Tina Moon, of course, specifically, as well as Marty Group. So, and our GIS folks too. So, want to give them thanks for their contributions, and there'll be more from them as we go forward. So.
Well, Ben, Duncan, Tina, if you're listening, we appreciate you. It's very complicated, a lot of moving parts. I thought it was a great meeting this evening. And I think, council members, all that's left is to approve the resolution that
With the specific feedback, though, I
with
believe,
this
as drafted.
feedback. And do you have everything you need from us at this point in terms of that feedback? We've given you enough to chew on.
I've got a good list, and I
Okay.
know I'll consult with our great town clerk. And we've got a video too.
Mm-hmm.
And with
Is
the
it
manager,
worth, though, given the way that this
I
is
think-
written, is it worth like agreeing? I mean, I don't know. This is parliamentary and my relative rookiness. When we have these line item feedbacks, do we not typically enumerate them?
I mean, it's probably nicer for staff to not have too many options to have to juggle. We can narrow it for them.
That would be my preference.
Yeah, so
I would move the resolution with moving to 5-day service, instituting a maximum. I guess those are the
Presumptive standards.
removing the presumptive standards.
well,
But if we have the maximum, right, that's where I just stopped short. Is it sounds like I think a maximum should be hard, personally. And then we can have a waiver, but not a presumptive. I think we need to be moving away from flexible administration and crystallize the labor here.
Why wouldn't we do 7 phasing down to 5, as Trish has recommended?
5, my understanding was the opposite. 7, when I suggested that, you took issue with that because 7 is the denser area, 5 being the broader.
You were going to the
broader to explore and suss it out.
Well,
and you have to adapt.
then I guess the only other thing I would want is to just be sure with attachment A that the engagement of community that is included, and just spelled out that we go to community now and find out what folks are using and what their interests and needs are.
Yeah, you gave us guidance about how we would engage with transit users and others who would be affected by these changes, which is our expectation and kind of hope for the summer engagement for this. And then you also noted, the options for phasing, which we don't need to do that, but I do think in any case, the unintended consequences as well as the benefits of the changes will be things we'll want to articulate, right?
Right.
Trish, I had
real concerns about those.
But whether those need to be in your resolution or not but those are some additional points that I had heard.
You finished.
So I was going to move the resolution with the addition of 5-day service district, maximums, no presumptive standard, and no phase-in.
And that is fine. I'm not sure. I wonder if this belongs in there, Danny, I do like this idea of the regular annual assessments or
Annual assessment is great.
and also I did like Sammy's idea of the looking at on-street parking opportunities. That could be a part of this as well. So-
Okay, so that brings the total feedback as I have it. So the resolution I am moving is the resolution with suggested feedback that we use the 5-day service map as outlined in the Chapel Hill Transit Short Range Transit Plan, that we institute a hard, non-presumptive maximum, that we do not have a phase-in, but that we do investigate with annual assessments, and that we have an on-street
Community
parking
engagement.
study.
Yeah, Randy made some good points on the community engagement.
City of Raleigh?
And City of Raleigh, thank you for the reminder.
City of Raleigh by comparison. Okay. So I move the resolution.
And
with
no
those
commercial,
second.
just restating.
No commercial.
now.
Commercial for later downtown district. Yes.
We missed.
Second.
Come on, guys.
Couple seconds.
Third and fourth.
Second.
Oh, I'm not sure where we are, but is there a motion?
He made the motion.
It's already moved.
Heard the
Sorry,
motion.
I was listening to it. And so Sammy moved and
He moved it. I second.
Danny moved. Sammy seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Okay, we nailed it. Thank you, Trish. Thanks to staff. Made some great headway this evening. And all at no cost to the taxpayers. How about that?
Draft in June, is that right?
Correct.
Yes.
So, council members, we are on to our final agenda item, and I believe this will be pretty straightforward. Oh, excuse me, Mr. Manager, I throw this over to you, don't I? I'm sorry.
Thank you. It's a joint planning area land use plan amendment for 2106 Mount Carmel Church Road. The purpose of this item is to request the town council consider approval of a proposed amendment to the joint planning use plan for a 4.66 acre property at 2106 Mount Carmel Church Road that was annexed to Orange County from Chatham County in 2021. Go to Trish, yes.
Thank you very much. So the town of Carrboro with town of Chapel Hill and Orange County have been working together on a joint planning agreement and land use plan since the late 1980s, applying to the southeastern part of Orange County. I have a map that I'll show you in just a moment. And property owners in this particular location have asked for an amendment to that land use plan because the property was annexed into Orange County by the General Assembly in 2021. There was a joint public hearing. A couple of you were there more than a couple, several, on April 20th. And the council members council referred the matter to the planning board for its recommendation, as is the practice. So we've provided a draft, no, not a draft resolution, a draft ordinance that would amend the land use plan consistent with the request made by the property owners. And I thought I edited this page, but forgive me. The property location is right down here on the map in the little circle spot. And if you look closely, you can see that it juts out just a tiny bit down into Chatham County. But it is one parcel of land that was split by the county line some time ago. I think originally it actually was in Orange County, and then it became part of Chatham County, and now it's part of Orange County. But you can see on this map the boundary of the rural buffer essentially is here. And then, of course, our jurisdictions are within that boundary. This is the 4.66 acre piece of this larger 8.135 acre piece that we're talking about. And this is the location where Mount Carmel Baptist Church is located here. A request, as is necessary when this occurs, when the jurisdiction from one county, when changes from one county to another, property has to have zoning applied to it. And in this case, the step before zoning could be applied was to have the land use plan that applies in the area, which is the joint planning land use plan, needed to be amended to include this property. So that's kind of why that we've come to this step has come before you, because you all are part of the administrators of the joint planning land use plan. So there is a parallel request that Orange County is reviewing to place zoning on this property. And the request is to designate this as rural buffer, the portion of the property in Orange County now. This is all in the rural buffer. And specifically, it also has another designation, which is the Chapel Hill Joint Development Area. So that means courtesy review requests are provided to Chapel Hill by Orange County if a development application comes in for this location.
Trish, what is that structure, and is such a structure allowed in the rural buffer?
This structure, this is a church right here in the parking lot.
Church
Yeah,
is
and then
a soccer field.
there's a soccer field here, a garden, a play area.
Okay, thanks.
Actually, this is part of the church. The church is kind of here and then here, and there are buildings.
Okay.
It's big.
Just another map showing, this is a map that is the exhibit to the draft, the ordinance change essentially. And again, we're asking for you to consider an amendment to the plan to designate this portion down here as rural buffer and also Chapel Hill Joint Development Area. So in your packets is this draft ordinance that would make the change. Chapel Hill has adopted the amendment. They did it on May 10th, and all the planning boards and commission have made recommendations to approve the change.
A second.
Any questions before we vote? Comments? All right.
Thanks, Trish.
Sammy moved, Danny seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Very much.
Great, thank you, Trish. Is there matters by council members? Eleazar?
Yes. Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. I just wanted to mention that as of about a little bit under an hour ago, we saw a veto override of Governor Cooper's veto to the abortion ban. So I just wanted to let folks know that, express that our resolution had no power, and that Republicans decided to move forward with their agenda of hate. And today is a bad day for women, girls, and anyone who is able to carry a child in North Carolina.
Everyone else.
And everyone else who failed to see a fair and faithfully executed process at the General Assembly. So just wanted to mention that as a lovely comment as we close the night. And with that, I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
Eleazar moves to adjourn, Sammy seconds, and Wesley, before we do adjourn, was it possible to get our resolution sent off just to have made that statement on behalf of council? Great. Thank you very much for doing that. Anyway, okay.
Right.
We are adjourned. Thank you all. It was a great meeting.
Going with Granicus, I'm getting this.
Anywhere.
You're so
That's why I
welcome.
couldn't download the agenda when I tried
I
to
did
log
my
in.
best.